Common sense and hope and truth, the family and freedom, and the value of our youth. So what makes me want to hold on to what I know is right, and in the face of opposition, to stand my ground and fight. My Alberta roots run deep. It's in my blood and in my bones. It gets stronger every day. When somebody tries to move in and take it all away, I draw a line there in the sand, stand my ground and say, my Alberta roots run deep. Yeah, it's living on the land, watching life come and go. It's working hard and playing hard, in sunshine and in snow. But we don't really ask for much, 'cause we know that God provides. He's given us all the tools we need to enjoy this life and thrive. So what makes us want to hold on to what we know is right, and in the face of opposition, to stand our ground and fight. Just draw a line there in the sand, stand our ground and say, our Alberta roots, you can't hide them, they define us. They made us who we are today, and when life's this good, you just can't throw it away. Our Alberta roots run deep. You can't dig them out or pull them out. They go deeper every day. So when somebody tries to move in and tear it all away, just draw your line there in the sand, stand your ground and say, my Alberta roots run deep. Run deep.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Let's Talk Alberta event here in Vulcan. And before I go, I better get a couple of them out of the way. Live long and prosper, and we're boldly going where no man has gone before. So tonight, before we get started, let me go over the emergency exit is to the rear, and the bathroom is straight ahead and to the left. You'll see it on the left-hand side as you go down the hallway. So you have to walk. If you got to use the bathroom, you got to walk right past us. So we're going to have 3 speakers tonight. We're going to have Tanya Clemens, Cory Morgan, and then Chris Scott. And our first speaker is a farm girl and, well, farm lady, sorry. And very active in the independence movement. And I'd like to introduce Tanya Clemens.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Tanya Clemens. I am a farmer. Our farm is about half an hour northwest of here, closer to like the Blackie, Mossley area, kind of in between there. I'm a 4th generation farmer. My dad and my husband do the bulk of that farming work, but I think that being out on the farm, you tend to be sometimes a little bit more libertarian by nature. I think we have a little bit of libertarian in our hearts because we're used to just doing our work, being out on our land, a little bit removed from government and Overwatch and the cities and all the people, and we're just kind of doing our own thing, and we want to do the good work and have it be rewarded. So lots of times I like to start talking a little bit about my Alberta flag, the one that I fly above my combine every harvest, and just kind of the feelings that invokes in me. Because I think when you look at the Alberta flags, you do feel a deep love for this land and for this province. It's not that we don't love Canada. That's not what it is at all. We absolutely love Canada. But Alberta is the part that I think that we can save on the trajectory that Canada is headed down. This little part, Alberta, is what we can keep safe. So every morning when I would go out at harvest, I would see my combine with the flag flying across the cab of it, and I would see my family coming to work together. I'd see one running the grain carts, another one on the semi, another one in the other combine, and I would just feel this quiet moments of peace. I wasn't thinking about Ottawa, I wasn't thinking about politics, I was thinking about the land, the sky, the work in front of us, and the people that I love. And that's what freedom feels like to me in my little corner of the province. And lots of times in those quiet moments of peace, I find myself thinking a lot about my dad and his grit, his courage, and his determination. He's the kind of man who just shows up every single day. When we had cattle, he hand-paled them, big metal pails, and he'd fill them out of that wooden granary. And I can still picture like the sound of that scraping through the oats as he would fill them up, the sound of his boots on that packed mud or snow. He walked out every single day, steady and deliberate, and even on days when it was freezing cold, because the cattle still had to be fed, and he just did it. And that's kind of how he's lived his life. He just got the work done. And over the years of that grit and determination, he built something, a life where hard work meant something, a life that could support a family, a life where you could look around at what you had and know that you earned it. But when I look at Alberta today, and I try to look at it through his eyes, I can't ignore that something has changed. Not all at once, it's happened slowly over time. My dad lived through the National Energy Program, as I'm sure many of you will remember as well. And if you weren't here for that, it's hard to fully understand what it did to this province, because it wasn't just policy. It hit Alberta very, very hard. Investment pulled back, projects were canceled, companies left, people lost jobs, businesses shut their doors, and families that had been doing well suddenly really struggled. And what's always stayed with me from hearing the terrible stories of that time is that it wasn't just a policy that didn't work out the way people hoped, it worked out exactly as it was intended. Marc Lalonde, who was the federal energy minister at that time, said, "We couldn't let Alberta become in the center of economic power in Canada." Imagine, they saw Alberta rising and they deliberately cut us down. And they've kept cutting. Do you remember the Canadian Wheat Board? It might be easy to brush past that if you didn't live it, but for farmers here, it was a big deal. You could do everything right. Seed your crop, manage it all summer, get it off in the fall, and then a Western monopoly decided when it was sold, who it was sold to, and what you were paid. Meanwhile, farmers in Eastern Canada didn't have to deal with that. They could market their grain however they wanted to. And eventually, a courageous group of farmers, including my friend and former MLA, Rick Strankman, had the audacity to load up their grain and take it across the border to sell it themselves. They were arrested, taken to court, some in shackles, for selling grain that they had grown themselves. There were court cases and years of pressure, more farmers speaking up, pushing back, and eventually it became harder and harder to justify why Western farmers were being treated differently than the rest of the country. And over time, that pressure built to a point where it couldn't be ignored anymore. And in 2012, under Prime Minister Harper, the single desk monopoly was removed, and Western farmers were finally allowed to market their own grain. It happened because people were willing to step outside what was expected of them and take the risk of pushing back. It happened because of courage. And when I look at Alberta today, I recognize that same feeling. The sense that decisions are being made farther and farther away, and we're the ones living with what comes from them. You see it in fuel prices climbing year after year. You see it in carbon taxes layered into everything, from the diesel on our equipment to the cost of transporting food. You see it when fertilizer doubles in price, and a decision made somewhere else shows up directly in your input costs. Even things that seem far removed, like Chinese EVs, come back and hit Western Canadian farmers through retaliatory tariffs on canola. And after a while, it stops feeling random. It starts to feel like no matter how hard you work, you're pushing against something that you don't control. And when you step back and actually look at the numbers, it explains why. Since 1961, Alberta has sent over $800 billion more to Ottawa than we've received back. That's now upwards of $28 billion leaving this province every single year that we send out that we get nothing back for in terms of services. That's roughly $6,000 per person, or for the average family of four, $24,000. Money that was made here and gets sent away and never returns. And at the same time, we've seen pipelines blocked, projects canceled, investment leave, with estimates reaching into the hundreds of billions, even over $1 trillion when you account for the multiplier effect in lost activity, economic activity over time. And you know what? We toss around the word billions so much when we talk about government waste and taxes these days that I think we've actually been disconnected from the scope of how much that money actually is. So let's imagine for a sec that the government decided to collect that $28 billion that we overpay from Albertans each year, and they wanted to collect it directly from us in $20 bills. So a semi-truck with a big shipping container pulls up to your door and asks for your share, your $6,000, say. You go to your stash and you count out 300 $20 bills, and they add that to the stack in the shipping container. And then they go to your spouse And that person has to count out the same. And then each of your 2 children. And then they go to your neighbor and everyone in your community until they've reached everyone across the entire province, counting out $20 bills to send to Ottawa. At the end of that collection period, we will have filled 56 shipping containers full of Alberta's money. Every 2 of those shipping containers represents $1 billion. So those shipping containers are going to drive away with Albertans' $20 bills in them, 56 of them, $28 billion, and half of those are going to go directly to Quebec. Just a little visual to realize how much money we are giving away. And imagine what that money could do if it stayed in Alberta. And yet many people still hold on to this hope. Can't we fix this from within Canada? And that's a fair question, but we need to look honestly at what's already been tried, because this isn't new. From the very beginning, Alberta was never meant to be equal. In 1904, most of you have probably heard the now famous quote by Clifford Sifton, who was the federal minister responsible for bringing Alberta into Confederation. And his quote is, "We desire that the great trade and wealth of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to our prosperity." That wasn't about Alberta's prosperity. That was about using Alberta as a colony to fund Ontario and Quebec. Because unlike the other provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta didn't get to negotiate our way into Confederation. We were just told how it was going to be. It took us until 1930, in fact, with the Natural Resources Transfer Act, for Alberta to gain control of its own natural resources. By 1947, we had the Leduc oil discovery, which started producing some serious wealth for Alberta. And that's when the relationship with Ottawa really changed, as the federal government became increasingly interested in the redistribution and control over Alberta's growing wealth. Which kind of leads us into the 1980s with the National Energy Program, where Alberta then lost billions. And then in the late 80s and 90s, Meech Lake and Charlottetown Accords, 2 constitutional reform attempts, and both failed. And here's why. This is why it's so difficult to fix things from within. To amend Canada's constitution, you need to clear 4 impossible hurdles. The first one is you need approval from 7 out of 10 provinces, representing at least 50% of Canada's population. So with Quebec and Ontario having 60% of our population, you need one of them on board. Then you need passage by a majority in the House of Commons. And if you happen to get through that hurdle, you then need passage by a majority in the Senate. And then the 4th hurdle is a real killer, because Quebec basically has a de facto veto vote. And they never actually even signed the 1982 Constitution. So go figure. So let's be honest, the chance of forcing a constitutional change, like removing equalization payments, is 0. Then continuing on our timeline, in the 1990s, we had the Reform Party, which came out of Western frustration. People here felt like we didn't have a real voice in Ottawa, so the idea was simple: fix it from within, lock arms. They pushed for Senate reform, better representation, more accountability, and they gained a lot of support here in Alberta, but when you look at it now, we're still having the same conversations. In 2001, we had the Firewall letter, where Albertans' own Stephen Harper, Ted Morton, and some others demanded that Alberta control pensions, policing, and taxation. Does that sound familiar? Because 25 years later, we're still asking for the same things. And then in 2019, we had the Fair Deal panel. Albertans asked for fairness. Ottawa shrugged and ignored us. In 2021, we had the equalization referendum, where 62% of Albertans voted to abolish equalization. But knowing that this requires opening the Constitution and knowing the insurmountable odds for doing this, Ottawa probably just laughed at us, shrugged, and carried on. So it's not that we haven't tried. We've been trying for over 100 years. Every time Alberta tried to fix this confederation from the inside, the answer was the same: no. So maybe it is finally time to try something new and bold and courageous. And that's where I come back to my dad again, because he didn't spend his life waiting for perfect conditions or all the answers or a perfectly laid out path for him to travel. He called on his grit and worked with what he had and built something anyway. And now I look at my kids and I think about what they're stepping into. Maybe Forever Canada is right in that doing nothing feels safer, but it isn't neutral. Things are changing whether we act or not, and not in a direction most of us would choose. And the more I've watched, the more I've tried to be honest about it, the clearer it's become to me. The certainty of where Canada is headed is far scarier than any uncertainty of forming something new. And all of this is leading us toward a moment, Referendum Day, when Albertans walk into a polling station on October 19th and we're handed a ballot that asks a question that no generation before us has ever been asked. I can feel like the goosebumps on my face every time I say that still. We walk in, we take that ballot, and I hope that you stop for a second before you mark it, because in that moment, you will realize what it actually represents. It's not just your opinion or a vote, it's everything that brought us to that moment. The thousands of people, the decades of effort, people like my dad who showed up every day and built a life here, people like Rick who were willing to stand when something didn't feel right, even when it cost them, people like the thousands of petition canvassers giving so much of their time to collecting signatures in the wind, cold, snow of Alberta, people who gave everything for our freedom. And all of that comes down to that one mark on a piece of paper. And I think in that moment, there should be a pause, and we should all pause long enough to really take that in, to understand what's being asked, what it means, and what comes next. Because a moment like that may not ever come again, not in our lifetimes. So when that day comes, October 19th, 2026, and you're standing there with that ballot in your hand, please stop, sit in the reverence of that moment, and really understand what you're part of. Because I know when I'm looking at that ballot, I will also be visualizing that Alberta flag flying above my combine, and I will think about the life that was built here and the life that still could be. So thank you, and may Alberta be forever strong and free. And then shall I introduce Cory? I don't think Cory really needs an introduction. Cory Morgan is pretty famous on the World Wide Web and everything right now in social media. He's got the sign campaign going with his TPA and painting Alberta blue with his signs, and it's taken off huge. Obviously, he has a lot of support. And actually, a lot of the things that I speak to on the timeline come from Cory's book. It's an excellent book if you don't have it, the Sovereigntist Handbook, and he just has a revised edition that's been updated too. So I highly recommend getting those. But here's Cory to tell you all about things.
All right, thanks, Tanya. Thank you all for coming out here. It was great the last time I was here, but I remember the snowdrifts building up outside while we were speaking and knowing I had to drive home in that. It's going to be much nicer this time. But I never have to have my arm twisted to come out to these towns. I love coming out. It's a lot of things I don't miss about working in the oil field, but getting out and about like this was one of the things I do miss. Getting out to the real Alberta, seeing people on the ground. And at a time like now, when we're making history, we really are. We're in a unique period, something we've never seen before, an opportunity we've never had. And it's not going to be easy. We're seeing that. You know, some people are frustrated. The question on this referendum this fall, that weak sauce, that word salad, that weird mushy thing about starting the next question, sucks. But it's what we got, so we'll work with it. We don't give up. We're Albertans. You put something in my way, I'll either move it out of my way or I'll go around it. Put something else in the way and I'll do that too. And that's what's happening now. I mean, we shouldn't have been under the illusion that the road to independence was going to be straight. I mean, that's the way we would have liked it, but realistically, there's going to be some curves, and we're seeing that. But as long as we're always moving forward, eventually we're going to get where we want to. So people who are dejected or frustrated with this question, some people are already saying we shouldn't bother with it, it's not the question we wanted. Well, that's an attitude of losing. We don't have that. Plus, this has turned into the de facto campaign on independence. It is a victory we must win on the way there. Because if we lose it, that will shut us down. I know we vote for option 2 on question 10. What a mess. If we vote overwhelmingly for that, we aren't independent the day after. It's just another step towards it. But if only 20% of us vote for that, we've set ourselves back. So we have to win this as strongly as we can, and that's what we're getting going on. And we're seeing the obstacles being thrown up. And I see them as a good thing, in a way, as irritating as they might be, because the establishment is realizing that this is serious, finally. And I don't care. It's too late, guys. That ship has sailed. We're on our way. We've never seen this much discussion on the national and provincial stages about unity, about Alberta's role, about where we're sitting. And we're seeing them pull out every possible gun they can already to try and shut this down. They're scared. They know it's real. And we're seeing it on the ground level, we're seeing it on the high level. They found Jean Chrétien and knocked some dust off him and put a microphone in front of him, and he even started talking. Jason Kenney's trying to rebuild his political career on this. Fabio Lukasic is prancing around purring in his bus. But that's the campaign we're dealing with. And they're trying to shut us up. So some of you familiar with the battle I'm having with the town of Taber? Man. I see T-shirts have been put out with cobs of corn on them now. Corn's turning into this symbol of resistance in Alberta. But Taber, that really is one of the most conservative towns in Alberta. It's a weird town, nice town, but it's always been a little different around Taber. But for those who don't know the story, I started that third-party advertising group because I was kind of frustrated like a lot of people. The petitioning ended a month ago, and then everything just kind of disappeared. Everything stopped. Nobody was doing anything. So I wanted to show some visibility, and in a bout of insanity, I registered a third-party advertising group, opened a bank account, and suddenly ended up in this mess. We ordered a lot of signs to be printed, and I'll talk about those in a bit and the importance of them. And I wanted to make a presence shown as fast as possible, and somebody hooked me up with somebody who had digital billboards, which is great. You email them a file, you transfer them some money, it's up quick, and you're showing a presence. So we did that. A simple sign, not a controversial sign, the flag of Alberta. It's funny, this is turning controversial, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Man. So it had that flag. It said, send Ottawa a message, choose Alberta. Within 2 days, the town of Taber emailed the owner of the billboard and demanded he take it down. Because some blue-haired fruitcake had emailed and complained. It said it hurt her feelings. By the way, my gender pronouns are he, him, if you were wondering. If you need proof, I'll have to get a couple of drinks first. But that's how fast and that's how scared some of the people got with just seeing an Alberta flag. And now we're just hearing, I just heard as I got here, in Sundre, again, good conservative foothill ranching country of Alberta, a rodeo parade that was going to have a float that was decorated with Alberta flags. The float was banned. Yeah, they aren't allowing it. No Alberta flags on floats. They're too political. Lukasic's going to be prancing around in his little purring mobile. He's okay. The double standard is there. We knew it was going to be there. So what do? We go around it, we go through it, we move it, we don't stop. Taber's learning a wonderful lesson this week. So that one billboard that was up that really nobody had noticed that much and was paying much attention to suddenly made national news. Suddenly went wild on social media. Suddenly people donated me another few $1,000s. So I put a second billboard up in town. Take that, you assholes. The third billboard's going to be up tomorrow. That's all the ones they got in town. So, and there's going to be a rally in Taber that Mr. and Mrs. Alberta are going to drive down with vehicles in the south on June 28th. We are going to paint that town blue. We're going to show them that when you try to stop us, we only push back harder. And if you thought you were shutting us up, you had the opposite effect, you idiots. But that's fine. I'm glad they started that early example, and we're making an example of them because every other town's going to try and pull this stunt too. And the leftists who support what Tabor's doing, I don't think they understand. Because not every town council is like Tabor's that would do something like that. There's some very conservative ones. And you know what? It's just as wrong if a conservative town shut down advertising for the Forever Canadian side too. Like you guys, they don't understand that rights will be turned against them too if they allow them to be stepped on. So we're pushing back on that. We're going to make an example of Tabor so other town councils, when they encounter something like this, because it's going to be a 4-month campaign, there's well over a dozen third-party advertisers, there's going to be things going up, there's going to be more conflicts. Let's make this example now so they know you're not going to get away with it easily. So, because people have asked too, they said, well, I've been donating to your TPA, but we don't want it all focused in Tabor. There's, for one, I'm getting a good deal on the billboards. Don't worry, I'm not blowing too much on it. But there's a point of principle to be won there. That's why I'm hitting it. Because people are saying, well, why don't you have billboards up here and here and here? I'm going to get there. But first, we got to squash that bug. Then we'll move on. But part of what I was getting at, what we need to do, what we needed to show, wasn't just my frustration with the existing independence organizations, some of which are still spinning their wheels when we should be campaigning, was at least showing visible evidence of a campaign. I couldn't handle it anymore turning on the TV and seeing them giving all that coverage to Lukasik, putting signs all over the place. So I started that. But we've got to have the conversations. We've got to bring the independence movement out of the closet. Those of us in here aren't afraid of it. That's why we're here. We're the movers, the shakers, most of us. I'm sure there's some people, I hope actually, that are maybe on the fence. We'll have those discussions. That's what this is about. But the bulk of the room is probably already there. But there's the others who feel that way but can't express it yet. They don't feel comfortable doing it yet. I had a donor with almost $1,000 it gave to the third-party advertising. I said, great, can I get a sign for your lawn? No, I don't know if I can put that on there. So you'll cut a check for almost $1,000, but you won't put a lawn sign on because you're afraid of what your neighbors will say. I still appreciate the money, so hey, I won't stop you. You don't have to have the sign. You can give us another $1,000 if you want. But it says a lot. This is a person very committed to this movement. I mean, that's a good chunk of money. But at the same time, doesn't want the social stigma of showing a sign that just says, choose Alberta with an Alberta flag. Worried about the neighbors. That's why we've got to start that trend. We have to normalize the conversation. We have to get those signs out there and make your neighbors realize that, whoa, there's other closeted independent supporters out there too. I want to see people driving home from work. One day they see one of those blue signs on the way from a neighbor's. A week later, they see 2 of those signs on the drive home. Maybe 2 weeks later, there's 4 of those signs. That's when maybe they're going to feel comfortable saying, you know what, maybe I should talk to George. I didn't realize he felt that way. And then they put their own sign up. Now that's just identifying and normalizing the conversation. One of the bigger battles we got, the huger battle, is winning that yes this fall, and it's going to be a big one. We're still in a minority position of the province with fully committed independent supporters. And we've got to admit that. We've got to be honest with ourselves. So we've got to move that middle, and that takes campaigning and that takes conversations. Some group has particularly been focused on talking about what's called a GOTV campaign. For those who haven't campaigned much, it means get out the vote. It's a very important part of election campaigns. What it means is you identify your supporters, and then when election day comes, you make sure that you have volunteers to call them up and get them out to vote. And in tight races, it can make a big difference because, sometimes people, something good is on TV or whatever, they don't bother to vote. You lose by 2 points. The problem with the GOTV campaign, it doesn't win you new voters. It only identifies existing ones. And if you don't have that majority, you can have the best GOTV campaign in the world, you still won't win whatever your election is. You have to convert people to your side. It's an interesting setup that we have right now. It's unprecedented. There's no real rule book for us to follow. I wrote the Sovereignist Handbook to come as close as I could. I never envisioned, though I didn't write a chapter on how do we deal with having 15 third-party advertisers all biting off different parts of a campaign. But it's fascinating. And I think it has a lot of potential. It could be really good, but it's uncharted water. It leaves a lot of these tasks that can be bitten off one piece at a time by different groups. Makes it harder for central organization, but it also makes it harder to shut down one organization. But it comes down to who's going to win that mushy middle then. Who's going to do it? How are we going to get those people who are potentially supporting independence to fully support independence. That's where we come in. Those are the conversations. This is what I talked about last night. Was I watched, the debate with Jason Kenney and Keith Wilson. And Jason Kenney went straight to the emotional case and to the fear-mongering. Frustrating, annoying. We've got the monetary case. We can make that easily. Alberta gets a terrible deal in the Federation economically. Anybody saying otherwise is just lying, or they don't understand economics. Tanya's laid that out very well already. We aren't doing well there. So we got that one. Freedoms? Well, we all lived through COVID, so we know our freedoms aren't bloody well protected in this nation either. It's another big area that people would want to move from the Federation from. But the emotional case can override those facts with people. And we have to be careful in campaigning to those people who have that emotional attachment. It doesn't matter if you think it's irrational that this person hangs on to this just saying, I love the concept of Canada, because it will still make them vote to stay. So it doesn't matter what their reason was valid to them. And to change somebody's view on an emotional level takes a personal communication. That's not going to happen through me on YouTube or politicians or columnists or TV ads or brochures. That's going to come from people talking with other people they trust. That's face-to-face conversations about this. That's how you work on the emotional case, respectfully, one-on-one. And we've got to look at that. That's always been the heart of my speeches. We take it on ourselves as the responsibility for people we know. We're the term I used before, independence ambassadors. You got to look for the opportunities. The other thing also, I warn people, watch for the ones where you don't have a chance. You know they're there. The ones that you know the second you start talking about it, they're going to tell you to get stuffed or get really worked up. And you know what? They might even be close friends or family members. Leave it alone. It's okay. Talk about sports with them, the weather, whatever. It's okay. You've identified those. There's 30% who are never going to vote to go. So don't spend the energy on that. There's 30% who are going to go no matter what. I think a few of them are in this room. I'm one of them. It's that 30 in the middle we need. And they are flexible, but we've got to talk to them. We've got to find out why they're afraid to go still, or they haven't made their mind up yet, or the emotional thing. Jason Kenney went straight to what I think is the most commonly used and the most powerful emotional case. He talked about Memorial Drive in Calgary, where veterans and the people who died in the wars are, honored and memorialized in Calgary, and every town tends to have a monument, things like that. And he said, along the lines that we're disrespecting their history if we dare to try and do this. My grandfather fought in World War II. Many of our family members did in past wars and conflicts, or even served recently. They fought for freedom. It just happened to be Canada they were with, not for Canada itself. Canada's just a structure. Now, it's easier said than done. Just saying that to somebody doesn't lose that sentimental attachment. So we've got to have that discussion. We've got to be respectful. I will always, to my dying day, have nothing but gratitude for the people who sacrificed before me to build this province, to build this country. There were a lot of great Canadians, and gave us the freedom so we can peacefully pursue this independence, as frustrating as this slow and winding path has been. And it's that respectful case when people can realize we're not trying to go hard on the memories of people or the actions of people or things that people did before us by becoming independent. It isn't the end of a country, it's the evolution of one. We're growing into something new, something better. We were a colony at one point. We became a federation. Well, now this federation has changed. We've grown up, and we want out. And the attitude that's been coming from Central Canada kind of speaks to that patronizing. Literally, I saw a column where it said we were having a temper tantrum. A temper tantrum. No, you condescending son of a... We're exhausted. We're beyond temper tantrums. And we're grown up, but that's their attitude. They still think we're the children in the family, and no, we're grown up, and we're paying the rent, and they're not working. So we want to move out. And it doesn't mean we're wishing ill on the rest of Canada. That's part of that conversation. We don't have to be negative. We need to be positive. We're moving towards something, not just away from something. Towards something better. something more prosperous, something with more freedoms. And getting back to talking to other people and how we would convince them, the number one thing, and it's tough for a blowhard like me, ask them. Don't tell them. Ask. Start the conversation. Everybody does have concerns. And if you ask, they'll start talking, and you'll find out what their concerns are, and you can have that exchange. Because most people, once they start talking long enough about what they might be concerned about, the addiction epidemic, crime, freedoms, taxation, prosperity, they'll lead to the same road that you already have. And realizing if you want to address any of those things, we got to break out of this broken system. But we've got to let them get themselves to it. We facilitate the conversation, and they will make their own conclusion. We have a solid case, but we need to give people time to think about it and make what will be a very big personal decision. This referendum this fall is non-binding. It gives us an opportunity, actually. It really does give people a chance to give one last warning shot to Ottawa. That's one of the things I talk about. We want to campaign against Ottawa, not Canada. I don't have a problem with Canada. I'm finished with the system, but I don't have a problem with Canada itself. I don't have a problem with that flag. But I have a big problem with Ottawa. This will give people the opportunity to risk-free make a mark that really puts them on notice. Most of us who are voting are saying we're already on the way out. But if we've got some who want to vote for option 2 just because they want to give the warning, let's encourage that too. And then we'll continue to campaign after that for when the big referendum comes. Because I don't think we're necessarily in a position to win it yet anyway. If it was a true yes or no binding question, I don't know. But we're going to treat it like one. The rest of Canada is already treating it like one. This is being treated as the referendum on independence. And yes, it sucks, because we've got to win 2, they've only got to win 1. But we've got to win this one. So our campaign starts in this room. It starts at coffee shops, your own household, the dinner table, the soccer game, watching the kids, the bar with the guy you sit next to. All the opportunities, watch for them, look for them, have those conversations, get those signs on your lawn, get those flags in front of your house, normalize the conversation, because there's a lot more there than people realize. But if we don't express ourselves, they won't know it. That gentleman who kindly gave nearly $1,000 to my TPA, who I'm very thankful for, his neighbors will still never know for a second that he actually supports this. Well, until the electoral disclosure comes, and then they'll find out on the line. But it's a campaign that's personal, that's different. It's not a party sort of thing. It's a number of groups, and it's us. And we can do it. We've got an opportunity. The momentum is here. Part of why they're as frightened as they are, if you look at Brexit, those of us who remember, it was the same tone. The elites, the academics, the journalists, the Andercoins talking down at us. How did that work out? They screwed up after they got their vote. That's a different story and a different speech. But when the establishment tells the people that their voice doesn't matter anymore, people tend to push back. And the establishment knows that now. And they aren't dealing with it well. They're being condescending, and they're pushing at us, which only helps. So we have that potential. We can do it this fall. Let's have these conversations. So I'm going to leave this, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer, because that's where I get to learn a few things, and there's a lot more to answer. And I will hand off the microphone to Chris Scott of the Whistle Stop Cafe. Campaign's on the mind right now. I haven't slept much. Give me a break. Everybody knows who Chris is. And Chris has been a great advocate for freedom, and of course he's been the heart and soul, along with Shane and some other volunteers, of having these Let's Talk Alberta events. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you guys, and I will let him start bending your ear for a little while. Thanks.
Thanks, Bert. Well, thank you very much. Cory actually kind of got it right. The Whistle Stop Cafe, we do have a very big, robust campaign going on. And it's a campaign to feed you some of the best food in Alberta, the best coffee, the best hamburgers. If you haven't tried it yet, I would encourage you to. You can be part of that campaign, and then you can leave us a Google review. So, yeah, thanks, Cory, for that segue into my campaign for great food. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. It's awesome to see all the chairs, just about all the chairs full in Vulcan, Alberta. Last time I was in Vulcan, no, actually, maybe I've been here before. One of the times that I was in Vulcan, possibly the first time, is the most memorable because I was still pushing a service rig back then. And I remember it's the first time I actually broke my rig. I broke lots of rigs before that, but this was my first time as a tool push. So I'm rigged up, we were southwest of town somewhere, I don't know, but it was absolutely beautiful. Everything was green. It was a late spring, early summer day. Sun was shining, and I'm sitting in the doghouse watching the rig crew trip pipe, and I hear this massive bang from underneath the rig. And I go out there, and I'm looking around, and nobody stopped doing anything. And I asked the driller, I said, what was that sound? He said, the beam broke. As he keeps going, I look underneath the rig, and the beam is shaped like a V instead of straight. And I'm like, well, why are you not stopping? He says, well, the rig didn't fall over, so we just kept working. And as I was thinking about that story, I think about times in my life when we identify that something has gone wrong and we need to intervene. Right? Like this was a pretty obvious thing for me because I heard this massive sound and I went and I saw something physically broken. And I thought, hey, we should probably intervene. So we did end up doing something to fix that after I noticed it. But I think a lot of people are feeling like they have noticed something has gone wrong in Alberta. Something's gone wrong in Canada. Maybe some people can't quite put their finger on it. Maybe it's just something they've heard or something they see on social media or the news or whatever. But I think for the most part that anyone in Alberta can feel, at the very least, they can feel that something is different. Maybe they don't know whether it's wrong yet or something's broken, but certainly people feel something's different. And it could be the left-leaning NDP supporter who has to sit in a hospital for 8 hours to get checked out, or the conservative restaurant owner who got hit by a train, literally hit by a train. Like I could reach out and touch the thing as I was getting pushed down the tracks. The car is bashing into my side. I think it broke a few ribs. I went to the hospital. I sat there for 4 or 5 or 6 hours in emergency and then just left because I couldn't get service. So at that time, I actually really felt like something was wrong. I think that that's a pretty extreme example, but there are other things that I'm feeling and hearing and seeing right now. One of them was a few days ago, a fella came into the Whistle Stop Cafe. He was on a campaign for a great hamburger as well. He was at the Alberta Sheriff's Service. And we have a little conversation. He said, man, things have really changed in the last couple of years. And I said, yeah, I could feel that too. I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, I'm way busier than I was before. The amount of repossessions I'm doing and I'm having to serve documents and these types of things has like tripled. So I said, man, that's terrible. I've been in situations on the receiving end of stuff like that before. Last time we elected an NDP government, but I didn't think we would be at that place again. And he said, yeah, and the worst part is it's senior citizens. Yeah, like the people that built the province, built the country, are struggling so bad now that more than ever before, they are having their things taken from them because they can't afford it. That's a pretty serious thing. I heard another stat today, 1 in 4, 25% of Albertans have used a food bank this year. In a nation like Canada and in a province as resource-rich as Alberta, 25% of the people that live here have had to use a food bank. What does that tell you? It tells me that we need to start talking about some things. We need to have some kind of uncomfortable conversations about where we are, how we got there, how we get out of this, and why it's important. At the very least, if people knew or saw what's going on with our seniors right now, and this whole thing about them getting their things taken away, they should be willing to act. Because that's when we are motivated to do something, right? When something affects us, whether it's personally or maybe it tugs on our heartstrings, and then all of a sudden we feel like, hey, we need to get involved. We need to do something about this. That's why Let's Talk Alberta exists. Because we have some really important questions coming up in October. Many of them especially one of them, is going to have lasting and big consequences or benefits for Alberta, depending on which way it's answered. And we have an opportunity, for the first time, a real opportunity to address some of the root problems that we face as Western Canadians, not just policy or legislative band-aids that we see coming out of Edmonton, but real changes. That's the opportunity that's in front of us. And if we take a moment to think about, where we were, say in 2000 when I moved to Alberta, man, that was something else. We were working like crazy. We were making good money. Like things were just booming. Technology was advancing in the oil patch. We were accessing energy that we'd never had before. Things were moving and shaking. And it just doesn't feel like that now. It really doesn't. And what I noticed was, people are oftentimes scared to have these conversations. They don't want to, well, first off, I didn't want to admit that my political apathy contributed to the problem, because that's the first truth that I had to accept. But I didn't want to have conversations with people about these difficult things like Alberta self-determination or Alberta sovereignty. How are we going to answer these questions? But here we are with things that we're feeling and seeing and hearing every single day that are motivating many of us, perhaps most of you, to get involved and do something. So the idea here is that Let's Talk Alberta will offer a space where Albertans can come and talk about the things that are important to them. I'm assuming that probably the majority of people in this room are already on board with the idea of Alberta self-determination or Alberta sovereignty. Some of you may have questions, you may have concerns, some of you may have oppositions to something about that. And while I have my own opinions, my opinion, for the record, is that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. There is nothing that I would like better than for people to attend these meetings and challenge me on that and tell me why my opinion isn't a good one, or why we shouldn't pursue that. Why shouldn't we change the status quo? As I travel across Alberta and we speak to, I'm sure, tens of thousands of people by now, it's occurred to me that if people actually are opposed to my idea, they should be here, right? Why would we want to just continue preaching to the choir all the time? Even the people that follow that cool motorhome around with the dude that poses for his videos on his bed, if they really believe that the status quo is the best path for Alberta, I would think that they should be here having conversations with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? Every Albertan is going to, they're going to either benefit or suffer a consequence for the decisions we make in October. And if we don't start talking to each other and trying to change each other's minds on these very important things, we're not going to make the best decision. I'm pretty sure that my mind is made up, my position is firm, but I am open to people coming and challenging me, to telling me why the status quo is a better path, because at the end of the day, I want to make the best decision as well. I've been involved with organizations that have traveled the province and talked to Albertans about the merits and the benefits of an independent Alberta. I'm pretty firm in that stance, but who's to say that one of you couldn't say something or challenge my notion today that will change my mind? I really would invite you to try. As a matter of fact, I dare you to. I really do. So as an organization, Let's Talk Alberta, we don't have a specific position on what the outcome or what you should vote. We don't tell you how you should vote. Our idea is that we want to talk to you about the things that are important to you, and when you leave here, you'll be thinking about things, you'll learn things, you'll maybe be willing to talk to your friends and neighbors about these important things, and then we can all make a good decision together. That means that, we have to be, no matter which position you're in, which side of the sovereignty fence you're on, if you don't take the time to engage with fellow Albertans and try and bring them to your side, you're really doing yourself and them a disservice, right? And it's an uncomfortable thing because this is a very polarizing subject. It gets very, very heated, very fast. There's a lot of emotions involved. Many people, myself included, have patriotic attachments to this country. I have that flag tattooed on my back from when I was 18 years old. I've been a very patriotic Canadian. And even for me personally, when I came to the conclusion that Alberta independence was necessary and inevitable, not just for Alberta, but for Canada as a whole as well, it was a sad day for me. It was an emotional one. I had to accept that the Canada that I knew when I was a young boy is not the Canada of today. I had to come to the realization and internalize that if I wanted what Canada was to be here again, that we had to do something drastic. And Alberta, in particular, needs to stand up and lead. We need to be leaders, not just in confederation, but leaders in pursuing the values that we knew in our youth, that we knew this country held when we were younger. And if Alberta does that, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I really believe that by Alberta standing up and being leaders in this way, this will also force the rest of Canada to really look at where they're at and where they're going, and maybe consider why this group of people in Alberta has come to the conclusion that they needed to withdraw from the relationship to preserve their values. And I think it's going to do a very good service to everyone else in this nation. And not just this nation. This really is a kind of a global phenomenon right now that we're watching unfold around us. It's not just Canada that has these divides and these contrasting values. This is a global thing. You look at what's going on in the UK. They have some of the same problems we are, although they're much further down the totalitarianism path. I think 14,000 people in the UK have been arrested for being offensive on social media. That's something that is coming to Canada. I was in Holland 4 years ago talking to some farmers supporting their pushback against the government because the government was pushing them off their farms. They were regulating them off their farms. And when I was there 4 years ago, there was 3,300 farms that were completely gone, wiped off the map of Holland. Farmers pushed off, government takes it back, turn it back in nature, that's it. And these things are, these same agendas are on the books in Canada. There's murmurs in Parliament about these things. The 30 by 30. It's already happening in other parts of the world. And people are pushing back all over the place. The values that created those other nations are still with some of the people, and they're trying to regain that. So, from the perspective of humanity, I think that Alberta standing up and the way people are paying attention to what's going on in Alberta right now is a very critical time, not just for us, but for everyone around us. And this idea really became clear to me as I had to personally push back against what the government stand up and be a leader in that, for better or for worse. And I watched as tens of thousands of people across Alberta and across Canada and even globally watched what I was doing and others like me, and it encouraged them to stand up as well. So I understand very well how one person or one group of people standing up for what's right can encourage so many more around them. And that's where Alberta is right now. And that's why the conversation is so critically important. Cory mentioned the word stigma. The topic of Alberta independence is taboo here. We're kind of considered the dirty separatists. Why? They don't talk like that in Quebec. They're open about these things. They talk about them all the time. Prominent business people, one of the wealthiest men in Quebec is a Quebec separatist. And nobody looks down, nobody thumbs their nose at him, nobody calls him a traitor. Why do they do it in Alberta? Why are we allowing the narrative to go that way? Why are we allowing the conversation to be dominated by people who would cancel us and not even consider our opinions because they don't think they can win a debate with us? We got to stop that. And the only way we can do it is if we continue to have the discussions. And if we're going to have the discussions, we need the facts. And you can get a lot of those right here. There's plenty of other groups that are, that are educating about Alberta, about Confederation, about the Constitution, those types of things. It's easy to get information these days. ChatGPT or Grok or Claude AI can be your best friend when you're trying to research some of these things. We have access to information like never before. You can spend 30 minutes a day learning about something. Perhaps you'll learn something like I did that really blew my mind, that, hey, Canadians didn't actually write a constitution. British Parliament wrote an act of legislature, passed it in England, and imposed it on us. Did you know that? I'm 46 years old, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that Alberta was legislated into Confederation without consent, without referendum, without the people's involvement. I didn't know that until I was 42 years old. So having these conversations and learning this stuff is so important. And if you take the time to do it, if you, I don't want to say arm yourself because that'll be a soundbite later, but if you, what did I say before? If you gather unto yourselves the knowledge about who we are, where we came from, and where we can go, you'll be able to have these conversations as well. And you must, because there's 5.5 million people in Alberta, and there's roughly 80 people in this room. That means that each one of you has to become a conversation starter. You have to become an ambassador for Alberta. You have to become a disciple and go out into the world and talk to people wherever they're at, have the conversations. If we do that, we will have the best outcome in October. And that outcome, or pardon me, that opportunity we have, I'm going to close with this. The opportunity that you are going to be given in October to decide your future and the ability of Alberta to self-determine is an opportunity that other people have had to send their sons and daughters to die for. It's an opportunity that you are blessed with, that other places have had to fight wars for hundreds of years to get that opportunity. It is the most valuable question that you're going to be asked in your lifetime in the political sphere. Don't take it for granted. Seize the opportunity and let's talk Alberta. That's all I got. I always feel weird standing up here after you've already clapped, but now that you've clapped, I'll tell you the tricky part. Doing this costs money. None of us take a paycheck, but we do try and cover the speaker's expenses. Shane's going to pass the nasty little yellow church buckets around. If you can throw something in to help us continue this conversation, please do so. If you can't or you don't want to, you do not have to. But your support is appreciated. After this, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back for a Q&A. And I beg of you, if there's something chipping away at you that you want to talk about, or a challenge that you want to present to any of us about Alberta's future, please bring it. I want to hear it. We want to talk to you, and we want to answer your questions, talk about your concerns, all those good things. So see you in 10 minutes.
Long live and prosper. Long live and prosper. Oh, yeah. So we're going to the intermission mode, guys, and we'll see you in the middle. I put the chairs and everything, so we'll see you there.
Whistle Stop Cafe Facebook page, or letstalkalberta.com, or Let's Talk Alberta's Facebook page. Find the posters for upcoming events and share them out to the people that you know. It's what I call the shampoo method, and I know lots about shampoo, don't I? I figured I'd say it before Chris did. But it's from the Clairol commercial from the 70s and 80s. You tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's the only way we're going to get the message out. I mean, I was talking with people even for here in Vulcan, and they would put a post up on Facebook, and immediately it would get deleted. We have that happening everywhere. It's not fair, but it's happening, so we got to figure out how to work around it. And the only way that is really effective is person to person, sharing it. So if you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. And without further ado, I'll get the speakers up here sitting, and I'll give Brad the mic, and we'll take it away.
Chris is always late.
Okay, well, not everybody all at once. If you have a question, just put up your hand, and I guess Brad will come. Oh, there we go. Mr. Brad.
Do I need a mic?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can hear
Yes.
you, but the interweb land can't. And not just questions. If you folks have any concerns or challenges for us, we're happy to hear them as well.
Okay. Hey, oh, there we go. It's for Chris. And why do you think independence is inevitable?
Because if you consider the way the world has gone over the last couple centuries, nations generally get smaller, they don't get bigger. And I believe that's because as societies increase in size, their values don't always align. And the natural tendency is to just, agree to disagree on certain things, and then you live under your own rules. Norway and Sweden, for example, they split the same year Alberta joined or was legislated into Confederation. Since 1990, there have been 38 new countries formed across the world. And this is why, because as the values change, it's not comfortable to live under the same rules or governance anymore. And so either peacefully with negotiations, they agree to disagree and split, or they're violent. And of those 38, I think it's 20 or 25% were violent. The rest of them were just negotiation and talks and things like that. And that's where we're at right now, right? We're talking about things. We're negotiating. We want to negotiate certain things, and we have an opportunity to be governed according to the values that we believe in, and still be good neighbors.
What's the timeline on this inevitability, do you think?
I will consult my crystal ball, but it feels like it's probably going to happen pretty soon. I mean, Alberta. Even the people that aren't on board with the idea of Alberta independence, a lot of people feel that what Ottawa is doing is not what they want to see, right? So they might have an emotional attachment to Canada or the nation right now, but they know we need a change. And that's kind of evident in some of the people that say, hey, maybe we should have this referendum ask this question so we can gain the leverage that we need to negotiate these things and get the changes we want.
I had a conversation with, it was actually my equipment dealer's, the general manager. I was asking if they were going to sign. I asked, a few of them signed the petition, and I said, did this guy sign? He said, no, he's a liberal. He likes Carney. So I asked him, and he said all the talking points, like Canada, we'll just be landlocked, and all those talking points. And then he said that housing prices, every time there's an independence vote, housing prices tumble. And I was thinking, and he's not that old, he's probably my age. But I didn't really have a good answer for it. But I just thought maybe they need to tumble because they're too high right now. So, but maybe people are worried about their wealth that they have in their houses disappearing, and I don't know quite how to.
It's a difficult one. I mean, change, instability, it makes people uncomfortable. It adds fear, and it's particularly actually among many of our seniors. Some folks who have paid off the mortgage, but the equity is what they're relying on, and that minor pension. And if somebody says that your housing value might plummet with a referenda, it can make them nervous. One of the things we should be honest with people about, because I think most Albertans have good BS detectors, is not promising paradise the day after a yes vote. Realistically, there would be some financial instability. The currency for the short term might take a bit of a bump. So we have to try and talk about a bigger picture. And that gets harder with somebody perhaps who's, again, getting into their golden years. So we remind them that for the sake of their children, their grandchildren, can they afford houses? Can they get in? A lot of people have been riding on that ever-growing equity of owning homes. But unfortunately, it's kind of leaving a generation behind that can't afford to get in. It's not saying I want to see the prices crater. What we want to see is a stronger economy so everybody can afford to get those opportunities we had. But as far as every referendum, we've seen housing prices go down. Well, we never had one here. So though instability in general will bring them down, I believe it wouldn't take terribly long post-independence anyways to see if there was a dip in real estate values for it to come up, because this new state would have tremendous resources and economic potential and would draw a lot of people who would want to come here and make a new life in the future. And I suspect the real estate would hold out fine in the longer game, but I'm not a financial expert. So it's just part of those longer conversations, though, because they're realistic concerns. But I think if we talk them out long enough, people will realize that in the long game, they're much better off.
I would just add to that too. Let's remember that after an independence vote and we're a sovereign nation, we lose the federal portion of our income tax. That money, that means that your paycheck is automatically bigger. You get a pay raise from it. Plus all those layers of those hidden federal taxes that are involved in all of our products and services. When they're gone, the dollars that you do have more buying power, and they will go further. So there might be some instability in the short term, but there's also some financial benefit too in the short term. So hopefully those things will weigh out. And then with the housing industry, I think about it quite often because I know that the federal government keeps on planting that seed that they're going to put the capital gains tax on your primary resident. So is that something that you want to choose, just to keep the status quo and live in fear, knowing that that's something that's going to happen? Or should we take a little bit of courage and pursue something different where that is not going to happen, and maybe there's some instability, but you will get to keep your own house and the tax laws will be much different?
One other thing, if I'm ever faced with a decision where, I have to make a choice, and the choice A will make my life more difficult, maybe I'll be less wealthy, maybe I'll have to struggle a little bit more, but my children will have a better future, I will always choose that, always. And it boggles my mind how often we hear people speaking of things like this. And this really hit me during the pandemic when people were talking about sticking needles in babies to protect themselves. How willing people are now to sacrifice their children's future or their children's health outcomes to make themselves feel safer. I've never been like that. I'm not a perfect parent by far, but I would gladly lose the equity in my home for my children to have a better opportunity than I did. And I think that most parents, if they take the time to think about that, they'd be willing to do that, because that's our whole mission in life, right? Is to leave the world a better place so that our kids have opportunities that we didn't. And if we fail to act on the opportunity we have with Alberta self-determination, which arguably would make a better future for our children, what does that say about our, what does that say about how we feel about them?
Hey, Alan here. Hey, I just got one question, and I just looked around the room here tonight. I didn't see any new Canadians, or I don't, for lack of a better term, immigrant people who are becoming a large portion of our population, and we're seeing them in every small town everywhere. Is the prosperity, or are we reaching them to bring them on side, or are they going to continue to vote for Canada? When we've been infiltrated by, in 2023, 60,000 new immigrants in 1 year. And at one point in time, we're going to lose the vote if we don't do something about that high of an input of immigration populations allowed into Canada and allowed into Alberta. And I'm not in any way racist. I'm very multicultural. I mean, I'm a Heinz 57 myself, and we came from Europe 400 years ago on one side of the family, and in the 1800s another side of the family. So, and I get thrown in my face all the time when I talk to my Indigenous friends or someone who, they say, well, you don't have any rights here, and these people have got more rights than we have right now, and they're getting all the gravy train from Canada, from the Canadian government. So what do you think we can, or whoever wants to address that question, if you can, what can we do to show them that our way will be more prosperous and a better way in the future if Alberta does become independent?
Well, first of all, if anybody told me that one group of people had more rights than the other because of the color of their skin, I would tell them they're a bigot. Like, that's a pretty racist thing, right? I do not believe that, I truly believe that all men are created equal. And especially in a place like Canada, no group of people should have more rights than the others. But we're seeing symptoms of that coming out of our judiciary, which is really troubling. The other thing I want to mention is in my business, I deal with a lot of vendors, and a lot of my vendors are first-generation Canadians. Some of them have been here less than 10 years, and they are the most fired up Alberta sovereigntists that I know. People who are new to Canada, came here, gave up everything in their home country, spent every dollar to get here, for the opportunity to work hard and be free and earn a living and raise their family according to the values that they appreciate that we have here. And they're watching those values be diluted because the federal government is refusing to acknowledge that the people that we bring into our nation should share our values, otherwise we won't have that nation anymore. So our immigrant communities are much more fired up about this than you might realize. This is an opportunity where the idea about let's talk Alberta, let's get conversations going, really comes down to you folks, right? You have to be willing to have these conversations and ask the questions and maybe get people to these types of things so they can ask their questions as well. Because on the topic of immigration, Alberta independence is the number one way to preserve the society in which people leave everything they have somewhere else to come to. If we don't do that, if we don't stand up for these things, then the people that want to go somewhere to escape, the things that they don't like about their own country, they won't have anywhere to go because we will be just like them.
It's a big and good question because I looked up those numbers. Nearly half of Albertans, that's the nature of our province, you look at the demographics, weren't born here. They came from other provinces or they came from other countries. So if we don't appeal to people who weren't born here, we're not going to win any referendums. So we have to think about that. One of the things we got to distinguish about and be clear, the problem isn't immigration or immigrants. It's mass immigration and uncontrolled immigration. It's been the problem. Targeted immigration with people where we have areas of need, with people who are willing to culturally integrate, or, still maintain cultures from prior places, but we know there's some cultures that have a much more difficult time, I guess you could say, than others when they get to new countries. Ask Ireland. And be a little more distinguishing on who's coming. But at the same time, the ones who are here are suffering from the mass immigration too, the ones who immigrated to make that future, like Chris said. For some of those folks who might watch my YouTube videos, I talked about in an episode I had an incident. It was really interesting. I was grocery shopping in Calgary, and a gentleman came up to me. He recognized me from some of my videos and things. He was clearly a man of I believe, Indian origin. And he just said he liked the videos, he loves where I'm going, and I happen to be wearing a shirt with an Alberta crest, but I'm also pushing a shopping cart, so we didn't talk too long. But one of the things he said to me was, I wish I could wear a shirt like that. And then, we finished the conversation and went our ways, but then afterwards I thought, man, I wish I could have talked to him longer. Because why did you not think you could wear that shirt? Was it a community thing? Is it a workplace thing? Is it a family thing? It gets back to that stigma I was talking about. The support might be there much more in that new Canadian community than we realize. But they're not, again, willing to come forward and show that yet. But most of the people from India aren't too thrilled if their son comes home from school and says, Dad, I'm a girl now. They're just as upset with some of the garbage as anybody else is. And if we reach out and we're welcoming and realistic with things, they could be very much an asset for us in this movement. But it takes those discussions. They're waiting for health care as well. They're having trouble with housing as well. They moved here to make things better, but they do understand that if the floodgate's wide open behind them, everybody's suffering. So we can have those conversations, and I think it's really important to try and get more of them out to these meetings. They're there, but I think they aren't necessarily feeling comfortable yet coming out, but they will. They've got many of the same values we do if we start talking with them.
May I say something?
You just did.
Anyways, I know one of the places we were last week, the gentleman, you know where he was from, and he supplied some food for us, I believe, at one place, and then we went to his establishment after. He came from another foreign country, quite on side with what we're doing. And there's some another place where a few nights before, 2 different places, we got some food, plus we got coffee and things. And both those people were from 2 separate countries, and they were on side with us as well. So they are out there.
So a couple of things. The first one was we were having this conversation with a family member, and they were concerned about civil war, like the rest of the country getting into that, wanting to fight to keep Alberta with us. whether it happened and then like Russia and Afghanistan, or Russia and Ukraine, things like that. So that's his main concern, is that might happen and we wouldn't have the resources to defend ourselves. And then the other one was, I'm disheartened when there's these independence movements and there's internal strife. I think it kind of hurts the movement sometimes when you hear, and I don't know whether it's the type of people that are involved or what, why we always seem to run into this issue. There.
So to the second comment, it's because there's people. Anytime you have a bunch of people working on the same thing, there's always going to be some things that get in the way. And yes, there are some speed bumps. There's been some hiccups. But I'm less concerned about those, and I'm more concerned about where we're going. I have some issues with some people right now. They have some issues with me. We both want to go the same place, and I'm just going to go there. I'm not terribly worried about these other things. Like, yeah, they're just side issues, whatever, but we all want to go to the same place. And it's not the first time in history that people that disagree on maybe even the majority of things are working for common cause. 1947 India, right? Muslims, Christians, atheists, they all wanted to be free. They wanted to self-determine. They wanted the British to stop tyrannizing them. They did not share the same theological values. As a matter of fact, they often wanted to kill each other. But they worked together. They kept their eye on the prize, and they went there and they did that. I mean, they had their wars afterwards and things like that, but there's no reason why people that disagree on things even as critical as religion can't work together for a common cause. So, yeah, it sucks. It's annoying, but it's a people thing, and we just get past it and keep going to the goal. Now, your first comment, what was? Civil War. My personal opinion is that there is a greater chance of aliens coming from Jupiter and trying to attack Alberta than Canada mobilizing the military to act against the democratic will of the people manifesting in the wish to self-determine. The other part of that is, our neighbor to the south, they have a long history of sticking up for democracy, for the little guy. If there's already a notion that that the United States would recognize if the will of Albertans was to self-determine, and they would support that. In that event, the idea that Canada would act out against that it doesn't make any sense to me. Canada is often the first or an early supporter of the self-determination of nations. Kosovo is an example. More recently, Palestine. So I do not believe for even 1 second that Canada would act physically with the military against Alberta. They'll probably do other things, like while we're going through negotiations, I don't think it's going to be all in good faith. We're going to have to roll with the punches a little bit, but the Civil War thing, I don't see it. Do you want Thanks. Why, that's the way I feel too. That's why I'm handing it off.
It's turned on, you just have to hold it close.
Yeah. Good. Pardon me? Right here? That's good. Nobody seems to be mentioning the food industry, the more or less genetic manipulation of foods and toxic foods out there. How do you see this as becoming a big part of the movement? Because we need to clean up our food, is my opinion, and that's going to be a whole long road. But I don't have hear anybody mentioning anything about that, because I just heard today they got GMO milk and that they're going to flood the market with that in Canada, and they've got GMO meats and all that sort of stuff. So how is this going to fit in with the rest of the movement that we've got going here? Because I think what we've seen is the movement of the whole world is going towards genocide, and I think that's going to be a big part of it.
Well, I can't tell you exactly the way it would go, but I can tell you that right now it's the Health Canada and the CFIA that regulate those things, for the most part. So if we want to change that, how do we do it? How do we change federal legislation as a Western Canadian? We really can't. I mean, we can try and elect MPs that believe in the same things as we do and send them to Parliament where they advocate for changes in laws that maybe would clean up our food. But we're really ineffective in that way. And that goes for all the Western Canadian provinces. We can't necessarily influence federal policy. I will take this opportunity to point out that the Whistle Stop Cafe uses small batch ground beef from one animal, butter, real maple syrup, and we fry in beef tallow. So if you're concerned about your food, we are too, and we're happy to help you along that journey. Not that we're perfect. But the other part of it is, like what I mentioned before, is I don't know exactly how it would go, but if Alberta takes control of their wealth and affairs and self-determines, we have the opportunity to decide what our food looks like. For the first time in Canadian history, right? Right now we can't do it. And on the milk front, did you know that 10% of all milk in Canada has to come from Quebec? Did you know that? So we actually truck milk from Quebec here. How ludicrous is that? We truck their milk over here and then, you know, they receive $12 billion of equalization. I don't know if that milk does a body good.
Not to mention that, because of the supply and management, farmers have to physically destroy milk. So that's reason 175,122 for Alberta to leave Canada.
Well, on that note, you're talking about supply management. There are people that are concerned about an independent Alberta and how that would affect supply management because they benefit from it, right? So there are some dairies that have tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in quota, big dairy farm. And how would that work, right? And I don't have all the answers to that except to say that I am an advocate for nobody being left behind. There are things, to be brutally honest, there are things that Alberta would have to pick up the tab on. And if Alberta decided not to have this quota system, not to participate in that, maybe go back to a free market, help farmers by lowering their input costs in one way or another so they can be competitive on a world market, instead of forcing consumers to pay more to subsidize. We could do something like that, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure that no matter what we do, we're not leaving any particular people behind. People with disabilities, people receiving federal subsidies, whatever, and independent Alberta would have to cover that tab until we figured out how to replace it with an Alberta program or, reduce the need for it or something like that. And supply management is just one of those things. But it's an opportunity for us to put our nose to the grindstone, figure out what we want to do, how we want it to look, and then implement that plan, and we've never been able to do that before.
On the GMO stuff? Well, I was just still thinking about the supply management too, because we have had conversations in the past. I remember talking to Dr. Modry about that too, about how would you transition supply management into a new Alberta, but out of the supply management system that we have. And we talked about the quota system would have to be something like a cost that would be eaten by Albertans to gradually buy their quotas back out and transition them through. And obviously that would require a lot of consulting with people that are involved in that industry. And I think that's what independence gives us the opportunity to create something new and to have those conversations and figure out how it's going to be. And like Chris said, it's not about leaving any Albertans behind. Why would we want to create something new and then leave purposely some of our fellow Albertans behind? So those are conversations that we'd have to have going forwards. Same with the GMO. We don't have the abilities to self-determine and make those decisions right now. So there is definitely, if there's a market for it and people really wanted it, that's something that we could pursue. But so many of these things are conversations that we'll have to have when Alberta is becoming independent. Something that I think will help through the transition and alleviate some of these fears and concerns too is what the Alberta Transition Council is working on. And it's like Keith Wilson and a group of, I don't know, maybe there's 50 experts involved in that now in all the different fields. So there will be someone that's an expert in agriculture. I'm a farmer. I'm not an expert in agriculture for sure. My husband's way more of an expert in it than I am. But there will be people involved in every different industry. So whether it's about questions about your mortgage transferring over, your RRSPs, or the aviation industry, what happens with federal regulation when we transfer into a new nation. And they're going to come up with the white paper that's the transition document for all of those things to help alleviate fears and concerns and just provide some information about how those things would transition.
Sorry, something just occurred to me. Is there anybody in the room that knows when you buy quota, where does the money go? Does anybody know?
It's an artificial commodity that was created by the government, the federal government, and then managed through the provinces. So quotas, just to explain it, the best analogy is comparing to Calgary when they used to offer only so many taxi medallions in the city. For a period, actually, because they would pay off the city councilors in Calgary for a long time, I think from 1984 until almost the year 2000. Despite the size that Calgary grew, they only issued 100 more taxi licenses because the taxi companies wanted to keep the amount low to keep the prices high. That made the licenses valuable. So a taxi license would cost you $60,000. But you're buying it from somebody else who owns that taxi license. So it's a government-created commodity. So these quotas that dairy farmers have now have a value in that they could sell it to somebody else because that's the only way you could produce dairy if you wanted to. So the money doesn't go to them, it goes from producer to producer. And if we got rid of that system, immediately it would lead to a bunch of bankruptcies and devastation in the dairy industry because unfortunately we created that dependency. But looking at New Zealand and Australia, who both got rid of the exact same, and it's a god-awful system, guys, it is. They got rid of that system, but they had to do it by easing out of it, paying out the people who had those quotas because they were assets they were stuck with due to a government system, and phasing into a free market system, which did actually lead to more prosperous dairy farmers and more diverse products going out. So it's a big discussion with people, but that kind of explains the quotas. But it's basically until we're out of the federal yoke, we're not getting out of supply management. But when we do, as Chris was saying, we can't leave people behind. It's not going to be suddenly take the cleaver down and say, okay, you're on your own. We do have to make sure that those people who have invested multiple generations of family into that system, that they can be eased out of it and continue to be productive producers.
Nobody will be able to hear you. Just 1 second.
So what you were saying that the quota system is like political blackmail because they're buying what they're getting for a quota.
It's a price-fixing cartel.
Price fixing.
Yeah. Price-fixing cartel, he says.
Good, thank you.
So if I'm a dairy farmer and I have, I don't know, say 10,000 liters of quota, can I sell that to the federal government, or do I have to sell it to another producer?
Yeah, you want me to go on supply management? I can for a while. I've written a few columns on it. It's a big beef with me. People might have seen the videos where literally thousands of liters of milk are being dumped down a drain because you can only produce so much as to the quota that's been assigned to you that you have to sell into the system. You can't sell it on your own or find your own price or find your own market. And if you hit the limit of that quota, you overproduce, it's illegal to sell it. So you dump it, or you feed it to your pigs or whatever you might be able to do. In a large operation, though, they just dump it down the drain. It's, my wife grew up in a dairy farm by Rockyford. This is how dumb it was. Her father had a quota for cream, but he didn't have one for milk. So they would skim the cream, sell that, the family would consume as much milk as they could, and the rest got poured in the irrigation ditch because it's illegal to sell it. That's how restrictive and ridiculous this system is, but it's really created a dependency. It's the same with chickens. You own over 400 chickens, I think, and then you've got to buy a quota for that. Eggs as well. And Martha Hall Findlay actually wrote a lot of good stuff on that with the Canadian West Foundation. On average, at this point, it's looking like it's costing the average family $1,000 a year extra on their grocery bill because of Canada's supply management systems. So it is a big issue that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but we're getting hit pretty hard with it.
Yeah, I want to address supply management regulations, and because I'm a farmer and I paid close attention to supply management and I hate it. So the reason quota costs so much, the only reason quota costs so much is that milk is too expensive. So the extra money that farmers get goes into the quota because they want to, same with land and equipment and all those sort of things, because if you get a bumper crop, land prices go up and equipment prices go up because everyone's buying equipment so it's the same idea, right? So I've heard a lot of people say, well, if we got rid of, supply management, we get American style, same with healthcare, we get American style. Never mind all the other countries that have other systems that are better. Yeah. We'd get American style dairies and we'd get growth hormones in our milk. Well, that would be fine. If there's no regulation, you can buy what you want, right? So the market will determine what is available for you to buy. And if there's high enough demand for no growth hormone milk, then you buy it, right? But right now, and same with raw milk. If you want to buy raw milk, in the States you can buy raw milk. It's kind of buyer beware. If you want to buy it, you can buy it. And if you don't, you don't have to, right? Where here, it's illegal to buy raw milk. So I think it's just we need to, and we can't, as far as the GMO, the food thing, we just cannot have government ban things, because that's government giving government power to more power than they deserve, right? I think government needs to have a lot less power. So we just need to have the freedom to buy what we want to buy and have like a free market system, right? So
I think we're in agreement in a lot. Just to imagine a system ahead. People have different concerns with food. It's what we eat. It's what goes into us. The only thing we should need, I think, regulation on is, of course, some degree of health and hygiene, but just clarity in labeling so people can make that choice so they know what they're getting. If they don't want to get GMO-type foods, they can choose not to. If they want to, they're okay with it, they can do so, as long as it's clearly labeled. Likewise with the milk. I don't care if a person wants to go suck it right out of the cow. That's their business. Not my sort of thing, but it is actually illegal to sell raw milk. If you get some milk out of the cow and hand it out and try and sell it for $1, you're going to get charged. As long as a person knows it's not pasteurized and they want to make that choice, let the free market decide. It's there for them.
Isn't it interesting that our government funds with tax dollars a safe injection site so that people can consume things that are illegal and obviously bad for them, but won't let people make a choice to consume raw milk? It's ludicrous.
Well, I grew up on raw milk, so you grew up a lot.
Well,
like we have beef cows, and we just milk cows. And I mean, we don't have a dairy, but we'd always have open cows or cows that lost their calves, and we just milk cows and drink the milk. So I grew up on raw milk, and we'd actually go to the Hutterite colony when we were short of milk, and he would, dump it out of the thing, and we'd give him cash, because there's a little bit of corruption or whatever on the Hutterite colony. But
we'll edit that out.
They said, they said don't tell anyone, but that was fine. But we grew up. And I still, up until, before I was married, I still drank raw milk. So I don't know. It's just a thing. Yeah, it's fine.
I think you, sir, are a good advertisement for raw milk.
You mentioned that there is going to be a commission or a consultation process for the transition. Is the public going to be able to be involved in that at any priority level? Or is that going to be an afterthought where they make up their mind and then check with us and do what they want to do anyhow?
That would be the worst thing to do going into a new system, right? Like if we're going to build a new nation and want to do things right, we should not take the baggage and the garbage from the old system with us. What I was referring to was the Alberta Transition Council is coming out with white papers that show how different industries can transition into becoming a nation, just to alleviate some fears and concerns that absolutely this can be done before. And I think, as Chris said, maybe your numbers were, I think the numbers that I've learned was the last 50 years has been 40 new nations. What were yours? 38?
1990,
38, yeah. So this is not something that is completely new. It's new to us, but other nations do this all the time. They form new nations come into existence. They have transition processes. It's capable of being done. So that's what I was referring to, was that document that's going to help with transitioning things that are federally regulated, federal infrastructure, into the new nation of Alberta. What was the next part of that one, sorry? Oh, will we be involved? Yeah. After we have the vote on independence, there would be a constitutional conference, and that's where all parties come to the table and start to figure out what is our constitution going to look like, what are we going to want included into it, and then it will ultimately be ratified by Albertans. I would suspect that there's going to be different groups putting forwards draft constitutions or things that might come out onto the table, but those will all be proposals and drafts, just to get people's ideas flowing of what a new Alberta could look like, where our priority is going to be, and make sure that we're protecting Albertan values within it. So yeah, that will be ratified by Albertans.
So the transition papers in particular, that isn't something that the public would be involved in, and they really shouldn't, because it's industry leaders and experts, like, for instance, people who are in aviation that understand what parts of aviation are managed federally, what parts are provincial, and how that transition would happen. I have no idea, right? And so these are the Transition Council. I think there's like 50 plus people who are all experts and leaders in their industries, who are doing outlining the steps to take their particular industry that they know inside and out from either a federally regulated, federally managed, partially federally regulated, to a Alberta thing. So that's not something that you and I would necessarily have input in, because we just don't know. But the second part of it that Tanya talked about, the constitutional stuff, that would be something that everybody would participate in. Did you hear that? I just heard a pin drop.
Can I ask a question? For Cory, when exactly are we going to have a billboard in Edmonton?
Billboard in Edmonton?
Yeah, like those things, those billboards are annoying the Tab administration over there?
Yeah. Well, we can only do so much, but no, it's a good question. When I'm going to get billboards in other places, and like I spoke earlier, actually, there's another third-party advertiser, Jason Levine.
Yep.
And he's got a few up in Edmonton already around the legislature, and they're kind of similar. They're Alberta flag, and they're talking about, I believe, freedom and such. So that's that interesting concept we have with all different groups working together towards the same goal. We can't collude, but at the same time, we don't have to step on each other's feet. So I don't think I would bother buying billboard space in Edmonton. Jason's got that in hand. Maybe the two of us would split on Red Deer if we started talking about a middle ground.
Oh, ho, ho.
And just so everyone knows, here and in the inner tube land, as Ben would say, if somebody is campaigning for Forever Canada, for the status quo, they're welcome to attend these events and say their piece. Like, I'm totally happy to have somebody come and set up a table with Canadian flag merchandise back there, or Forever Canadian merchandise. I do want to talk to them as well. You do see mostly Alberta-themed things here, but that's because of all the people that are invited. These are the people that come. And I would encourage people to come that have differing opinions, so that they can engage in this conversation as well. And specifically, the third-party advertisers for the stay side, they're more than welcome to be here. We do not specifically advertise for any third-party advertiser or for any outcome, but all are welcome.
Can I add a little comment?
A little comment, Max.
1, 2. I'll be able to about the immigrant. Somebody was asking about the immigrant community not being quite actually involved or being nervous about what's happening here. What I've heard on the ground is that in the cities, the immigrant community is not necessarily being looked at after by conservatives, and they're being scooped by the Forever Canadian clan. And what tends to happen is that the Forever Canadian clan is actually telling them that they're going to lose basically everything that Canada has given. And it seems to be like a disconnect between the immigrants who came prior 2015 and 2015 onwards. What are your thoughts on that? That's more like the attachment to Canada. That's probably like a question for Cory, actually.
So yeah, you're talking about some of the differences in attitudes of some of the immigrants that have been here a longer time, and then versus the post-national clown Trudeau.
Yeah, because it seems to be because what I've started to see, at least from my own perspective, is that the immigrants who been here in Alberta or / Canada for more than 15 years, they tend to gravitate more on the subject of independence, and those who are newer, unless I'm mistaken, they tend to defend the status quo without knowing that there's another side with Alberta independence, right?
Yeah, it's no coincidence that a whole lot of things seem to start happening in 2015. We know what happened then, and whether it was our GDP per capita plummeting, but another part was that ideological imbecile who was running this nation for 10 years, who did say things like, we're going to be a post-national country and we shouldn't, talk about integration or sharing values. And it was this weird ideal that you can all come here and then not change. But what that led to was ghettoization, actually, and not necessarily a slum, but you get communities that are getting more introverted and tight. If you go into Calgary, you go in the city, you're going to see an Indian community, but you're going to see a Sikh community, you're going to see a Middle Eastern community, you're going to see an Asian community. There's always been a degree of that. I mean, Bridgeland was the Italian community, but it's not spreading out as much as it used to many years ago, and it's getting more tight. And it does make it more difficult because then reaching those communities, to be a little candid and having worked on some other past campaigns, campaigning in immigrant communities is a whole special art form, and it's a different sort of thing. You don't really actually campaign as much door to door with the people, you campaign to the community leaders. And the Liberals have been very effective in community, well, often, unfortunately, it's kind of similar to our Indigenous situation. It's easier to buy the love of the chiefs or a few community leaders than to worry about buying the love of the rest of the people. And then they'll be the gatekeepers to the information to the rest. So in making it more difficult for people to reach those community members directly on the ground, it has made it more difficult for us to, say, communicate and make that case. As we said earlier, there's a lot of strength and ability and great people in those communities, but it's getting harder and harder to get at them because we lost that concept of coming here and sharing cultural values. And, they're telling people just to maintain how you were and stick to your own. So that would be my thoughts on why there's a difference between the older immigrant community and the newer one. But we shouldn't discount any of them because, again, everybody has the same concerns and needs and aspirations. And we can make our case to them very effectively, just like anybody else. We just have to work it a little differently.
Does anyone here has any questions? You can raise your hand. Okay, he's on a question? Okay.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment or a story, I guess. So I went to Estonia for Christmas. Spent a week in Estonia because my wife had lived there previously when she was in her 20s. And when she was there, USSR had just fallen. So we went back. It was kind of a dream trip, kind of for her to go back and see but they're right on the Russian border, right? And I went to a museum, and it walked you through all of the, I guess, tyranny that they were submitted to through all the different nations that had claimed them, right? And it had only been, it's quite emotional because you go through and you see all, like the museum is made to feel oppressive in the area that is Russian occupation, right? And what USSR did is they tried to erase Estonian culture. So they would move Estonians out and move Russians in, right? So I don't know, it's extreme, but I feel like Canada is kind of on that same trajectory. If they can get rid of our culture, then they can subdue us, right? But it's interesting, they've only been independent since the fall of the USSR, and they're like, some of the buildings there were 1300s, right, or 1100 AD, right, is when they kind of, and they decided as a people how to rewrite a constitution. So it can be done. They had an interesting tax laws. They decided they wanted corporate business to come to Estonia. So they had no business tax on retained earnings. And it was only disbursements that got taxed, right? So that's an interesting thing for a modern country to have no business tax, which kind of makes sense because business is what you're encouraging it to grow, and then you pay tax on personal income you take out. But there are ways to do it, and we don't need to be stuck in this rut of this is how it always is. This is Canada. You know what I mean? We can't fear what the future. So.
Yeah, this isn't the first time people have contemplated self-determination. It won't be the last. One of my favorite quotes is, "It's not rocket appliances, Ricky." Like, this isn't it's not an insurmountable hurdle. This is something that people have done, can do. Alberta is very tenacious. We have an intelligent population. We have some very strong minds working on this right now, and all indicators point to this could be absolutely successful if we just take the time to talk to each other about it and share our opinions, share our feelings about the subject, and then get on with it. And then we can be the history lesson in the future that people look back on and say, hey, these people, they stood up for what they believed in. They stood up for their values. They refused the status quo when it was threatening their prosperity, and look at them prosper now. And I think that it's our responsibility to do everything we can to facilitate the conversation, educate ourselves, and make sure we have the best outcome in October. If we do those things, regardless of which way it goes, it'll be a success, and we just keep doing this for the foreseeable future. So if there's no other questions, I think I'll close with that, except for I want to say a big thank you to all the volunteers again. Once again, we showed up here and a bunch of stuff was done for us. There was people willing to help out, however. Super appreciate that. That's how these things happen. Thank you, folks, for your contributions to the cause. And, of course, thank you to the speakers who sacrificed time with their families to come out and attend these things with us, and to Max as well.
Long live and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Have a great night, everyone.
We're in Vulcan. What do you expect? It's a Star Trek town.
All right, I'm going to boldly go where I've gone a million times before, into my minivan.
On your way out, make sure that you grab, there's a ton of little flags on the front there. Make sure that you grab one of those little flags. And I think Cory has some yard signs.
Thank you.